Hello and welcome to chat. I never remember this. Every time before I start, I think, well, I'll check what number chat we're on, and then I forget. Chat number 12 of What Does Nature Mean to You? Conversations. And I'm still smiling and laughing from last night's wonderful conversation with my friend and study buddy, Chika, from Learnomic. So if you haven't seen that, then hop back on the my Instagram feed and or on the stories, the highlights, and then you can check it out. So I am hoping that you are all okay and that you've had a chance to get outdoors, maybe today or whenever you're watching this. I've had a lot of discussions about not everyone having access to green spaces, and certainly last lockdown I remember really thinking about that, and so I spent some time kind of hopping along the pavements and looking for little pockets of nature along the way, little weeds or flowers or things like that. So perhaps if you're living in a more urban environment or can't easily get to a green space, then maybe even just going for a little walk along the pavements and seeing what you can find. But my guest for tonight has just arrived, so let me see if we can get this to work. Hopefully I should be joined any minute now by John Doyle. So just waiting for this to work. And there we go.
You.
Hello, John. You all right?
Can you see me at all?
I can indeed see you. Yes. Can you
Good.
see me?
I can perfectly. Yes. Wonderful.
Great.
The technology.
Well, welcome and welcome to Instagram Live.
Thanks. So, I guess you lead off, Drew.
Absolutely, yes. Well, John, for you, but also for anyone watching, we've not met before. I've just been following you on Instagram, and all I know about you is that you are a naturalist, a therapist, and a great photographer. So perhaps you could introduce yourself a little bit more.
Certainly on the photography front, although it is a great joy in my life. I love getting out there with my camera. We could be here till Christmas because I have had a very varied career. So I'll really bring it to a summation in the last couple of years. I lived in Somerset for the last 5 years and worked for the NHS there in mental health as a face-to-face therapist, psychotherapist, if you wish. And that was really interesting. As you can tell from my accent, I'm not from Somerset, not from Yorkshire. Family have quite a few connections, or had quite a few connections with Kent and Sussex going back, but that skipped a few generations. And my grandfather was from the UK and basically fetched up in Dublin. And that's where I was born and raised, as they say. But had travelled here to the UK many times and, had friends and worked at places like Heathrow in the express freight industry. So I've been in all different types of industries. I've worked in different sort of segments of those industries, and it was, interesting times. But I guess my heart was always really in something a little bit more prosaic, something a little bit more deep and interesting, shall we say. So certainly psychotherapy, which I retrained in from about 2006 onwards, although I'd actually studied psychology at college many, many years ago. But that was quite close to my heart, and that was a very interesting few years. So that's sort of bringing you up to date. I moved from Somerset about 2 years ago now, and basically wanted to see another part of England. I know the southeast quite well, but basically I wanted to have a good look around here, and I have a couple of friends here who are wonderful and have supported me in the move. So it's been a really interesting time to be here. Obviously, lockdown and all of that has slightly curtailed my activities, but before and between the various lockdowns, I've got up to the Dales, I've explored there, and I've always been interested in trying to combine the ideas I have around the natural world and my deep, experience of that from a very early age, with mental health and with all the challenges that people working in mental health face. I've often found that, one of the things that we, deal with day to day in mental health is isolation, which is very pertinent at the moment. But certainly, you know, anxiety and depression, the terrible twins of anxiety and depression, often mean that people lose contact, you know, with everything, with their friends, with family, and certainly with the world in general. And being able to provide something like a lifeline, something that is with people for all their lives, is something really grounding and very special to them through nature, I think would be certainly where I'm aiming at in the next couple of years. So that's a little bit of a question, and I guess you have a couple of questions for me, maybe.
I do indeed. Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that introduction, and especially I mean, obviously, you know, a little bit of the work that I do, nature connection work, forest bathing work, and we talk about nature always being there for us. But I really, really enjoyed that phrase, or the way you described it, of, you know, nature being something that's there for them all through their lives,
Yes.
and always there. And that's a really strong. Oh, we've dropped you. There's a really strong, powerful statement, actually, especially perhaps when people may have not felt that anything else has been for them there all their lives.
Indeed, yes. And I mean, you know, I've had a lot of loss, you know, again, losses in many ways. I mean, we all suffer losses in our lives, but basically, you know, it seems to be in the modern world, we don't have ritual, we don't have connections through maybe belief systems. And I'm not saying this can replace anything, and we have to respect that, obviously, people's belief systems, etc. But there is something there which is available to anybody. And I think we sort of, in the modern world, where about 70% of our populations are living in cities, it's so easy to forget that, so easy to lose it. And, you know, if we think of native people, or people that are removed from their landscapes or their home ground, so to speak, and what happens and how devastating that can be for people. And I think we have brushed a lot of that under the carpet for many years. But maybe this is a time of, you know, that we face a lot of challenges, but maybe there's a lot of openings possible to us too, if we slightly open our minds a little bit.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. Well, yes, let me lead you to my first question that I've been asking everyone then. So what is your earliest memory of connecting to nature in some way?
Yeah, I have a very crystal clear memory, although it goes back decades. I know I was about 3 years old because I know where it was and when it was, and it involved woodlice of all things. I can remember the day, I can remember it was sunny, and I was put outside in this amazing garden that we had. And I'll explain a little bit about that maybe in a minute, because it certainly was very formative to my early years to have this available. And my mum pointed out some woodlice to me, and I'd never consciously seen them. You know, as a 3-year-old, there's so much going on, isn't there, at that age? And I was fascinated with them. And I also thought that they didn't have a house. And she explained they had a sort of a shell thing, but, you know, in baby talk sort of thing that you do at that age. I was very upset that they didn't have a house. So we had to get a flower pot, and we had to create a house for the woodlice. And I went and checked it every day. And of course, they'd skedaddle down very quick.
How rude of them.
Yes. But there was no shortage of them either. But you know, that really spurred sort of that curiosity. And I think that's something that your previous callers may have, you know, touched on as well, that curiosity bit, especially with children. It's so important to encourage that. It's so important to try and stoke those embers. I believe they're there for everybody from an early age. But our whatever experiences in the setting we find ourselves may or may not encourage them. So I guess what I'm really thinking of is that that experience set me off on a road which, you know, was with me for till the present day. And, you know, I've had different experiences. I've been able to indulge my experience with it, but it's certainly something that no matter where I go, I was just thinking before the call of something that occurred to me many years ago. I was stranded in a hotel in Madrid in February, which was cold and miserable. And basically, you know, there was nothing to do in the area. It was sort of like on the outskirts of the city. I can't remember where. But next door, just down the way, there was a sort of an abandoned construction site. So I managed to keep myself amused there for a few hours every day, just trucking around. And some early flowers were out and some things. And there was lots of bird life, funny enough, around. And, you know, that was an amazing experience. And I could come back every day, not feeling that I'd wasted a day and that I had to wait for the flight, you know, which had been cancelled, whatever. And, you know, that's a sort of richness of life. And I'm sure many, many people carry that. But I love encouraging that in people too, if I can. Yeah.
Mm.
So that was the early experience, and I went on to that. I have a few little props here tonight. I thought I'd just dig them out. Okay, here is
I love this.
see that battered copy of an observer's book, Pond Life, you know, and these were instrumental, and I'm sure in millions of people's lives. I love these little books. They're still wonderful little things, and another one on geology, and you know, my real interest, my real passion was entomology, even as a child. And I remember my parents were very, very understanding, shall we say, and let me away with quite a lot, including raising butterflies, tortoiseshells, small tortoiseshells, and I managed to see one at the age of about 10 emerge. You know, that wonderful moment. Just after lunch, I had been called to lunch, and it had decided to just start, but I got back just in time for the chrysalis to open, and I can't remember the technical term of the liquid that comes out and all of that, and it was just like mind blowing. I can say that, you know, something like that, having got the eggs, we're talking from egg stage right through to midsummer, whenever it was, June or July or something like that. And you know, those are experiences which last, certainly with me and with one, for I think a lifetime. And I never cease to be amazed at nature and what it can do, you know, in the sense of the awe and the wonder. Not so much just the mechanics, it's the awe, the wonder, the connection, the what if, you know, and it's on our doorsteps everywhere. But sometimes folks just don't have the, I guess, the curiosity or a little bit of help, a little bit of assistance, a little bit of encouragement to actually get on with it, you know. So that was the early days. Ended up going to college and studying natural history for a year. But basically the maths got the better of me, so I had to end up doing an arts degree. But I convinced the tutors to let me back to do various courses in natural science, and that was wonderful. And you know, those were great experiences, field trips, etc. Funny enough, coming to Yorkshire is a little bit of like deja vu, because one of the places I was very fond of in Ireland was the Burren in County Clare. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, on the west coast, which is a karstic landscape. It's a pure limestone. It's a lot of it is really bare, and it's very, very similar to a lot of places up around Malham and beyond in the limestone areas in Yorkshire. So it really is fascinating for me to come here, and the thrill of going out in the land. I have a very good friend, Linda, and we go out on these adventures, and they really are, because one never knows. Like the other day, we found this underground underground stream that had sort of, because the rain had burst out into the landscape and was doing all types of things. And that sense of dynamic is just extraordinary. It always blows me away. I mean, I can't put a value on it. And I'm sure that's true for most people that are connected in that way, you know. And it's lovely to be able to come here and reestablish those type of connections. But that's part of the story. Yeah, that's definitely part of the story.
The words that really stick out in that is that curiosity, and then awe and wonder, and these are all words that seem to come up again and again when we have these different chats, and even in my training actually, for forest bathing nature connection work, of inviting curiosity, inviting awe and wonder, and those being critical elements that are probably innate to us as children, and then somewhere along that they lose that. And as I have more and more of these conversations, I'm curious, what do you think was the magical ingredient that happened for you, for example, that you didn't lose it? Or did you lose it for a bit and come back to it?
No, I was fortunate enough that it persisted all the time. If I just, up to the age of 10, I was very lucky to live in this monstrous Victorian house with about half an acre of gardens. Rented, I hasten to add. I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth. And it was just totally formative, you know, to be able to just stroll out into this and see the raw side as well, you know, to see the whole cycle of stuff. Don't wish to be anyway more of it, but, you know, that is now sanitized away, I think, for a lot of kids. You know, there's lots of stuff that is, you know, it reminds me about a month ago or so, whenever we weren't in lockdown, I was in a local nature reserve, and some hard-pressed teacher came along with about a dozen kids between the age of about 8 and 10, all wearing their little Viz jackets and all holding forms and all shouting and screaming. And I really pitied the poor guy, you know. Alone. They came and looked at it, pointed at a tree and ticked a box and whatever. And afterwards, I just let, I sort of moved away, so I just let them be whatever they're doing. But I ended up coming back on the path they'd been on, and I picked up 3 of the forms, so they weren't really engaged. And the whole way of doing that with kids, if big groups of kids are always going to be, jumping and screaming around. But the idea of quietening down, being able to be respectful, a ritual involved, and of course we're in dangerous territory when we talk about things like rituals, because people imagine all types, but just that sense of we're entering somebody else's home here, or homes, we're going into somewhere that's really important, guys. Can we be quiet for 5 minutes? You'd be lucky to get 3, but if you can say 5, you're on a starting sort of thing. And I've seen that time and time again. And the issue here is that nature study, or whatever it's called in the curriculum these days, is probably like a really backseat, because it's not something that is to the fore, although there again, we may be in changing times. And I was lucky enough to have that continuity. So when I eventually moved to a new house, it was like sort of a magic land again, because there was an abandoned nursery garden centre of about 200 acres. So I moved from half an acre to 200 acres. And I thought this was my sort of bailiwick, this was my territory, And it was the first time I can remember seeing a diving water spider. There were sticklebacks in the stream. There was all that going on. And of course, very quickly, over a matter of 2 or 3 years, as the land was sold off for development, all that degraded. The poplar hawk moths disappeared, all of that. And it was something which struck me, I was then about 12 or so, that hit, how things change, how things can change negatively. And the stream I used to go to was tunneled away and, piped or whatever. And all of that really is, that was quite profound, and it took me a while to get over that. But then I spread my wings further afield and got on my bicycle and went elsewhere, basically. But I'm really interested. One of the things that's interested me since then is the idea of the urban wildscape, if you want to call it that. The idea of, some of the photography I take literally a couple of 100 meters from my house here. There's a sort of a really abandoned post-industrial, post-goodness knows what, ragged land, a land that is exhausted. It has been mined, it's been goodness knows what, and it's very scrubby, it hasn't got any attention. And yet the most amazing things turn up there, including something that I've really got an interest in is green longhorn moths that dance. They have the most amazing stuff. I'm trying to make a little movie next year. I didn't get enough footage this year, and I'm trying to get a movie next year. And they have an incredible life cycle, and that's literally on the doorstep here. Probably unknown to most people, uncared for most people, but that sense of wonder. Oh my goodness, look at this. And then there's the deeper connection, because we know there are deeper and deeper and deeper connections. And, for want of a better word, levels with this. I go in through the observation stuff with people, and then I go through, and sometimes they stay with it and sometimes they don't. And you've probably had the same experience with folk, in terms of forest bathing. Incredible too, that it's our friends in Japan that seem to be really attuned to the natural world in a way that we may have lost here in many ways. But hey, maybe we can get it back.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's definitely this year has perhaps shifted that for some people, and I think there's more and more people talking about it, more and more books coming out as I've been sort of exploring this, and particularly doing this and exploring more books and meeting different authors as well. So there's definitely more and more of a shift, I think, coming. But yeah, I mean, I guess with all of that, the next question I'm normally asking people is, what does nature mean to you? And in some ways, I think you've probably answered bits of that, but I'll ask it in case there's something more defining that you want to share. And I guess with that, what does nature mean to you, but also what does nature mean to your work on that therapy side of things,
Well,
and how you would answer that?
It's certainly central to my life, full stop. That's the easy way of putting it, to my own life. And in terms of therapy, I worked for the NHS, and there were very few occasions, and obviously with, agreement and whatever, that I could, especially with people who say had something like agoraphobia, introduce the idea of looking out the window. That can be a big step sometimes for folks who are very isolated. And then I mean, no matter where one lives, even in the most, in the middle of New York, there will be some birds, even if they're only feral pigeons. And developing that thought and developing that theme, working through that and asking questions, what would it be like to, so you really have to go very, very carefully with work like this. And I wouldn't, success is always qualified in mental health, but certainly it was lovely to see progress with some people where they would actually go out the door with a trusted friend or a partner. And there was a tiny little Collins book. I think it's an RSP book actually, and it's a spotter's guide for birds, and that really opened things up for people. It was amazing. They would come in thrilled to say, "I never knew that thing that was hopping about, was XYZ," and we could develop a conversation, and it took them away from obsessive thinking, for example, repetitive thinking, negative thoughts, all the old tapes running around. And it gave them that link to something greater than themselves. And that is huge value because mental health often it's the vortex that's ever shrinking. And that is the worry for lots of folks in that. And of course, we can't say it'll work for everybody, but I think there are many, many ways we can look at this and expand this. I'm not sure whether, we'd have to work with what we have. It's not a case of replacing what we have or being anyway confrontational with it. I wouldn't see any value in that. But if you want to think about economics of this, what the money side of this would be, it would be terribly cost effective as well. I think getting that message across to the powers in certain places might be difficult. But hey, again, we have to live in hope. We have to be positive. So that's where I'm coming from with that. And I'd love to pursue that. I had a course ready to go last February, which was a 5-month course, and I had to pull it at the I pulled it at the last minute, not knowing where we'd be now, obviously. So that's on the shelf, and it's a 4-stage course over 5 or 6 months, and I'm thinking of rejigging it, and maybe let's see next March. So. Yeah, I'll have the book. Huge volume.
Well, yeah, it's interesting when you talk about as much as it sometimes can be an awkward thing to talk about, almost putting that economic value on something. But certainly in Japan, for example, as you talked about earlier, they now have their established forest therapy centres, nature therapy, ecotherapy. There's something like 60 or 62 out there, and that is recognised as part of their healthcare and preventative healthcare. And as you say, then when you start to put that, if you need to put numbers on that, the amount of people that may help is as preventative is then ultimately saving money further down the line. So it's quite an interesting sort of concept to start thinking about, I think. And also even goes into then environmental, when we start to put, if we have to use these terms, put values onto nature, so that that kind of starts to try and limit our destruction of it and actually replenishing it and regenerating it. But there was something else that stuck out on all of that for me then was that just those tiny little invitations for people to observe something and notice, have some joy in perhaps identifying, but then also taking them to the present moment, when you say just kind of quietening the mind for a bit. And that's something that's often taught in meditation and traditional mindfulness, but sometimes can be a scary concept for someone who is perhaps holding on to all the ruminating thoughts. And equally quite scary to try and switch them off or feel impossible to, but to give them then perhaps something quite simple like a bird to observe or a plant to look at or something like that, which is quite a natural thing, can just be, from the work that I do, I think quite a simple way of getting someone to step into that present moment without really realizing it. It's not even a distraction, but it's some sort of tool or device, I think.
I think it's very important, and each case, each person is different. There are general themes, obviously. Support may be required because when people reach out beyond a comfort zone, there has to be something there that they can come back to. But even if it's 2 forward and 1 back, I always think that's a huge win in anything. And one of the things I'm nearly obsessed about. Can I just show you a tiny little piece of equipment? now that Christmas is coming up, I'm sure you've probably seen these. It's a tiny little five quid's worth, okay? And I'm not a gadget guy, but I'm a bit of a child, okay? So this has an amazing little light in it, and it's a 60 by and 30 by lens. And for 5 quid, it's just a joke. And in terms of bringing people's concentration, you know, bringing them, hey, look at this, you know, here's something you can have in your hand, here's how you use it. Now go off and spend an hour looking at different bits. Look at this, look at that, look at a leaf, whatever. And that really is nearly instant. I'm not saying it's an instant fix or anything, but it can sort of get over that zone. And I find that certainly with some folk that, you know, the idea of the great outdoors can be a little bit too much. So you have to start with baby steps and then gradually go there. And then, of course, the big win is when people become self-sustaining and self-maintaining, which I'm sure is your work too. You know, that people can get to that level that they can take it on, you know. But yeah, I mean, it's all out there, isn't it? I mean, even in these dreadful times, if we have a little bit of hope in our hearts, and if we see a little bit of more than maybe we can seen before. I mean, silence at the moment is extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, as I speak to you, this street I live in, and I'm sure it's the same with thousands of streets and roads all around the UK, is silent. There's nothing going on. But I can hear owls at night, and I can hear, you know, when the dawn chorus kicks off, I can hear all of that. So, you know, there's slight wins there.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, of course, a terrible time, a challenging time, but there are those moments that can be perhaps moments of joy or beauty or a whole revelation, really, and noticing something new. I'm just having a look at the comments because someone shared a comment here. If we can design nature into our urban landscapes, maybe it will reconnect people and have significant health and biodiversity benefits. Brownfield sites, like the place that you were talking about, the industrial site,
Yeah.
brownfield sites are nature havens. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I gave myself a challenge when I moved to Yorkshire. There's about 120 nature reserves in the greater Yorkshire area. Somebody will contradict me, there's probably 100 more, but 120 that I could list and find quickly through, you know, Yorkshire Wildlife Trust and everything. Of course, I joined everything locally here to the idea of getting out and about. But, you know, sometimes nature reserves, to be quite blunt about it, can be a little bit of a disappointment. And I know they work terribly hard. I know it's terribly tough, and there's multi-use going on. There's stuff next door. But if we consider that a nature reserve is something like a brownfield site, that the brownfield site can be extended to the street, to the whatever, we end up with a concept that it's actually all, you know, the whole island, the whole, you know, we can stretch this. I know I'm stretching it a bit, but that thinking to move from the particular to the greater, so that, you know, it is possible to see. I walk around the local town here, Shipley, and a few weeks ago I went down to give a quick run in and out to something, and there were a group of starlings up in a tree, and next minute I heard a curlew, and I said, curlew? Here in the middle of Shipley. It was a starling mimicking a curlew. You know, I fell about the place laughing. Of course, you know, the people sort of looking at me as if I had lost my head. But I gradually went under the tree, and you know the way they sort of pre-roost, they just stay up there and they give it welly, you know. And I thought, good on you. And it had obviously spent some time up in the hills because there's loads of curlew breed up in the moors up here during the summer. Curlew and lapwing are huge up here, thankfully anyway. And you know, and it's just that sort of lovely joy sometimes of seeing something brought into an urban scape which you didn't expect. But there again, my ear was tuned to hear a curlew, so maybe lots of folks around didn't. And I mean, that's really the work in hand as I see it too, you know. Just showing people, demonstrating to get that little bit of freedom going with them, if they wish, of course.
Well, that kind of leads me to the third question then, of what advice would you give to people in general, and specifically, I guess, if they are going through lockdown as well?
I think the thing is that there's more on your doorstep than you imagine, and there's lots of people. There's lots of really good sites out there, people much more skilled at this than I. But the fact that we don't have wildebeest and, you know, savannas around us in extremis sort of, but I mean, even the fact that we may not be able to go as far, and we don't know how this is going to work out in practice, The magic word, the one thing I'd say is local patch, and I borrow that from the bird watching fraternity. The idea of a local patch, and whether it's a municipal, it's just your park. If you live in the centre of London, it's probably just something. But how far can you walk, cycle, get to within a short period of time? I always say it should be between 20 minutes and half an hour. After that, you won't do it. And repetitive visits. It sounds crazy, but if you go, as long as you're compliant with all the restrictions and the law and everything else, if you visit somewhere again and again and again and again, you may be bored a few times, you may see nothing a few times, but I bet my bottom dollar you'll turn up there one day and you'll see or experience or have that magic, that lovely thing that nature gives us without us asking. And that's the joy. That the work involved is to be present. The work involved is not to demand or acquire or, force it. The work is to be there, and be there in every sense that one can, I guess.
I absolutely love that. There's the concept of the sit spot in forest bathing, which is exactly that, a spot that is yours to sit or stand or lie in, and visit again and again, and just be and observe and see what comes to you. And as you say, no day will be the same, and some days may be boring, but that's perhaps part of it. And see what comes to you, and that the nature around you, whatever that may be, even if that is a pigeon or starling or anything else, perhaps becomes accustomed to you as well, and you start to get to know them or observe them, and they perhaps start to behave differently once they're more comfortable in your presence. And there's so much in that, and again, that's probably something that we would have naturally done when we were more living out there as opposed to disconnected from it.
Indeed. But there's still a lot to play for. I mean, these are tough times, and I think a lot of people are suffering an awful lot of anxiety, perhaps not even showing it and being ashamed. I think one of the things we need to work on too is it's okay to be afraid. It's okay not to, be happy at the moment. It's okay to show your emotions, because that is something, of course, with mental health that often is a barrier for quite a large segment of our people that we work with. And it's okay not to feel brilliant or okay, but just around the corner, just out the window, just down at the park, there's something going on that knows nothing about this, knows nothing about our troubles as humans, and will just persist and go on. And have a look at that, see how they do it, check in with your bats and your squirrels and everything else that's around, and they'll have a story to tell you.
Oh, I love that. Oh, that's just the loveliest place to end this. I'm sure there's many other things I could ask you. It just feels like an absolutely perfect place to end this. So thank you so much, John. Thank you.
Take care of yourselves. Thank you.
Do let people know how they can follow what you do. Just follow you on Instagram.
Yeah, they follow me on Instagram at JohnDoyle123. John Doyle 123 and John Doyle IE 123, and you'll find me on Instagram and Facebook, though I'm really an Insta person. And the magic book will be out. I have a competition running at the moment for all those, and they need to go back through my posts, and I will put up another post tomorrow or the next day showing it. They can win themselves a copy of it. Listen, take care of yourselves.
Thank you. I've just got one more comment that someone said. I was fortunate to take one of John's workshops and experience deep nature connection. I loved it. An excellent chat. Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Bye. Yeah, big thanks to John. Right, so let me update you for the rest of the week before I forget. Tomorrow night, Thursday night, there will not be a live chat because I will be busy in the Women and Nature Book Club, talking about a beautiful book that I've almost finished, Wild Silence by Raina Wynn, which I would very, very much recommend. And I'm going to hope to see if I can try and get Raina on one of these chats as well. So the next that you will see me going live is Friday during the day, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I'll be chatting to David Willis because he wanted to chat from the woods when he's out in the woods. He's a bushcraft instructor, nature connector, and many more wonderful things. So that'll be 2 o'clock on Friday. And then also Friday evening, I'm chatting to Sonia from Adore Your Outdoors, who is another forest bathing guide. So we'll be talking all things forest bathing and more, and that'll be back to the usual time at 8:30 p.m. So thank you everyone that joined and shared comments or questions, and see you